What's going on, everyone? Chris back again with episode 44 of What Could Have Been in Wrestling. Again, I must apologize because last week I was sick with a fever and I just could not get a new episode out because I couldn't talk and I just didn't have the energy to edit. So again, I apologize for these delays. I can't seem to win with these sicknesses going around these days, but I'm really hoping that's behind me. Because this week, I want to take us back to something very modern day and go back only 2 years ago. But I figured it was appropriate because it is coming up on Survivor Series season, and I'll be at Survivor Series live at Petco Park this year, so it's something I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to go back to Survivor Series of 2023. And I wanted to talk about what if CM Punk didn't return to the WWE back then. Now, I will be referencing AEW some, but there is a more in-depth video that I'm going to leave a link to down below talking about what if Tony Khan was a real boss and handled Brawl out correctly and fired the guilty parties he should have fired. And I think it could have led to Punk staying with the company longer term. So this is going to focus a lot more on the WWE side of things. So if we go back to September of 2023, before I believe it was All Out, post the altercation he had with Jack Perry, where Tony Khan was fearing for his life, Tony Khan made the announcement that he had fired CM Punk, and that definitely was huge news, and immediately the speculation began. One, a couple people asked, was it a work? But the real speculation was, well then, when are we going to see him back in the WWE? So, if we fast forward a couple months to that November, and after War Games that night, where Randy Orton had returned to help his team with Seth Rollins and Cody win, we of course get the music playing post-match, and for the first time in almost 10 years, out walks CM Punk on a WWE show in Chicago, and the crowd goes crazy. So from there, if Punk doesn't return that night, and say he stays with AEW, like I said, I am going to touch on that a little bit, but a lot is going to change in my opinion through the WWE. First thing that's going to change is definitely the road to the Royal Rumble is definitely going to be a little different because the focus, of course, was on Cody, who hadn't been able to complete his story yet. But now a lot of people are wondering, well, will CM Punk win the Rumble instead? And will he challenge Roman to get his moment as main eventing WrestleMania? But also it just felt like the match made sense between Punk and Roman because of the history that Punk had with Paul Heyman, who at the time was Roman's wise man. So when we lead up into the Rumble, one of my favorite segments that they've done on Raw as a talking segment was the segment between Cody and Punk, where they both talked about why they were going to win the Rumble, and they both took some shots at each other where Punk talked to Cody, telling him about how his father, worked a trade, and his father wasn't a famous wrestler, and he was just a common man, and it felt like Punk kind of threw it at Cody and said, "I'm more Cody Rhodes than you are." Cody fired back, referenced the pipe bomb, but talked about how he created real change by leaving the company in 2016. Went on to start a real revolution, which of course led to the birth of AEW, and how he dropped a pipe bomb of his own. And then he told Punk, "I'm more CM Punk than you are." And I really love that build to the Rumble because it really got me interested in seeing who might win the Rumble, and at that time, I was rooting for Punk to win it. So without that segment, I think, honestly, the tension would be between Cody and Drew McIntyre in terms of obviously who would win and go on to headline WrestleMania. And I know that Punk had that tricep injury in the Rumble, but obviously with him not there, the closing two men in the Rumble, in my opinion, for 2024 would be Drew McIntyre and Cody, the two guys I just mentioned. And from there, it would be McIntyre getting eliminated, and it would be Cody still repeating as the winner of the Rumble. Now that's going to change quite a bit, especially for Drew McIntyre, because he was the one that would go on to feud with Punk post-Mania. And it would be obviously change the complexion of the world title scene. Because if you remember at WrestleMania 40, it was Punk versus Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight title. And from there, after McIntyre won it, he went up to mock CM Punk on the announce table, who was doing commentary for that match despite his injury. And it was Punk who tripped McIntyre on the table. And it was then Damian Priest who came out to cash in his Money in the Bank and pin McIntyre to become the World Heavyweight Champion, leaving Drew McIntyre's reign at like 5 minutes. And also, it was the continuation of that feud that we wouldn't get with Punk not returning, where Punk cost McIntyre the title at Clash at the Castle when he cashed in the Money in the Bank. And we really got to see a more creative and outgoing animated side of McIntyre with the way he mocked Punk in some of his promos, and also mocking Sheamus as well with that burger after burger line, and also having those backstage segments in a pre-recorded segment with that funeral for CM Punk and his chance at being a WrestleMania main eventer. So there's definitely a lot that would change in McIntyre's career, and we wouldn't have their match at SummerSlam, and we wouldn't have that outstanding match they had to conclude their feud at Hell in the Cell. So really, I think long-term, for McIntyre, the way things would change is I don't think he would actually lose the belt to Priest that night, because there'd be no Punk there to cost him the belt. Instead, he would probably lose it the next night on Raw in a surprise cash-in by Damian Priest, still with the Judgment Day at this time, but instead of the Judgment Day opening Raw, you can actually have Drew McIntyre open Raw, and you can have Damian Priest come out and challenge him and cash in that Money in the Bank right there and then, so a day after Drew McIntyre wins the belt. And I think he can win the match with a small assist from R-Truth, who again had that whole angle going where he thought he was in the Judgment Day. So that will definitely change things on the Drew McIntyre side. And leading up into War Games that year, actually, and now that we're in 2024, it would also change the complexion of War Games, where they did the Bloodline versus Bloodline story, because Solo Sikoa had really assumed the ranks as the new tribal chief and put together his own bloodline, bringing in Tama Tonga and Tongaloa, and then also bringing in Jacob Fatu. Then with obviously turning on Paul Heyman, and then finally it would be, and then of course they brought in Bronson Reed to complete their 5-man team. If you remember at War Games now, if we jump ahead a year later after when Punk would have had returned, I should say, when the Bloodline versus Bloodline story was really, at its apex, the original Bloodline had reunited with Roman, the Usos, and Sami Zayn, but they were still one man down, and they had asked Seth Rollins to be that 5th man, but he turned that down. And that SmackDown then, going into that SmackDown, when it looked like they were going to have their final face-off, still a man short, Paul Heyman comes out and says, it's not going to be 5-on-4, it's going to be 5-on-5. And then, of course, out came CM Punk. And from there, that got a huge reaction, and that led to the War Games match, which was won by the original Bloodline. So without CM Punk back in the company, that's definitely going to change that as well. That's going to change that storyline, because now who is it going to be that is going to be the fifth man? So really, obviously, I think the obvious choice there is Seth Rollins. And I actually think that that would be a good way to obviously hint at the future pairing between Heyman and Rollins, so Seth can agree to it on a stipulation that he doesn't disclose yet. And from there, we have Seth Rollins now in War Games, and you can still have the same outcome with a victory for the original Bloodline. However, now if we go past that, and we go now into closer to present day, and we go now to WrestleMania 41 in Vegas. WrestleMania Night 1 that I attended, by the way, as a side note. We go into it where the Night 1 WrestleMania main event has definitely changed, because it's no longer the triple threat match. It's no longer Punk versus Roman versus Seth, with Paul Heyman walking out with CM Punk. No. It is now a one-on-one match. And you can still have it where Seth Rollins is referencing to Heyman, hey, you still owe me a favor for helping you guys out at War Games. But of course, it could be a WrestleMania main event Night 1 match, playing off the two's history with the Shield and everything thereafter after the original betrayal. And of course, you can reference the year before, where Roman finally got some measure of revenge and hit Seth in the back with the chair. So now, instead of it being a triple threat match, it's a one-on-one match. A match that we've seen a lot before, between Roman and Seth. But in this instance, it's still going to play out the same way, where it looks like Roman has it won. But of course, Paul Heyman has to be Paul Heyman, because of course he's still going to come out for the main event. He's going to walk out with Roman this time, but he's still going to low blow him. Seth is still going to get the victory and pin Roman Reigns, and Paul Heyman is going to leave WrestleMania Night 1 with Seth, and that will be the start, obviously, of their angle and their pairing, which led to the creation of The Vision, which, just as of this past Monday, is now disbanded. So, interesting timing there. So, while that wouldn't change too much, part of it would definitely change for Punk's career, where he wouldn't get that WrestleMania moment that he had wanted for so long, and he wouldn't be able to main event a WrestleMania. And obviously, with Roman off TV, Punk has been the one really carrying the main feud with The Vision, and of course it led to the return eventually of AJ Lee. That just recently happened with that mixed tag match. And Punk has really been the one in his feud with Seth that really has kept the Vision story alive and kept it as a main event act. So I don't really know, with Roman obviously being off and on TV and not being a full-time guy, if he's the only one they screw over, and say they still take him out the day after Mania when Braun Breaker aligns with Seth and Paul, there really isn't much of a direction for the Vision to go from, because they don't have a full-time guy to feud with. I guess if you really stretch it, eventually they could shift their focus to Jey Uso to keep it in the family, but I still think that's a little bit of a stretch. So that would really affect, honestly, it wouldn't affect the main event of WrestleMania as much in terms of the outcome, but I think it would affect the future of the Vision quite a bit. And going back to my original point, it would effectively kill the return of AJ Lee, and she would not be back in the company. And it makes me think that maybe Becky, despite being married to Seth, wouldn't be aligned with Rollins, obviously, in that heel pairing, because there's going to be no mixed tag match, obviously, versus Punk and AJ Lee. So that's really how I think it would affect a lot of different angles on the WWE side. and say he stays with AEW, even though he clearly wasn't happy there. The person I think it definitely would help out the most, probably would be Ricky Starks, if he stayed as the main face of Collision. And Punk had been working with Ricky Starks quite a bit, and had recently brought out his own AEW belt that he had never lost, that he had to forfeit due to injury. And after he spray painted a symbol on it, he declared it as the real World Championship that he had successfully defended against Samoa Joe. But I think he could either drop it to Ricky Starks eventually, and I think obviously that could lead into his heel turn, because he had been definitely hinting at it, being a heel, and he was definitely getting more of a heel reaction upon his return to AEW in June of 2023, in that early summer. And if he doesn't drop it to Ricky Starks, who he had been working with, I think ultimately it would lead to a rubber match between him and MJF. A match that MJF had hinted at the previous fall when he had returned after dropping his own, I keep using the word pipe bomb, but his own, quote, shoot promo, calling out Tony Khan for being a mark and basically talking about how he's not being paid nearly what he's worth. And when he had returned at All Out, the night of Brawl Out, remember he comes back as the Devil, and he pointed to Punk, who had just beaten Moxley for the belt, and made that sign that he wanted the championship. So at the time, even though he was in the middle of Better Than You, Baby, and was in the process of making his face turn, I think the rubber match can still happen between him and MJF, or MJF and Punk, I should say. And this time the dynamic is flipped, and you have a heel CM Punk as the real world champion, or self-proclaimed, versus the AEW champion, a babyface, MJF. And in the end, the one who should take the rubber match, even if Punk stays with the company, is MJF. MJF was still the future, and is still the future of the company. He's much younger than Punk. Punk, when he made his debut in AEW, had said he was there to help, and I think he really did want to help elevate the young talent, including MJF, who had pinned Punk in his hometown when they had their first match on Dynamite. And I think it would obviously lead to MJF getting that decisive victory in their third, and for the time being, final match. And obviously walking out with both World Heavyweight belts to be the undisputed AEW champion. But I think it would have been a really interesting dynamic and a good twist on their feud that would have been revisited. With, like I said, the role switched, where instead the guy who had been the babyface since debuting in AEW is now the heel. And of course, the stuck-up MJF, who had made his face turn thanks to Adam Cole, is now the one being cheered, and I think it would have gotten a big reaction, and a positive one at that, because I think a lot of people wanted to see Better Than You, Baby continue, and they wanted to see MJF still remain the champion. So that's really where I'm going to leave it. So I know the timeline was a little out of order, because I had to go back and forth between the WWE and then reference AEW at the end. But that's really how I see things playing out and how it would affect things had Punk not returned to the WWE in 2023. And I think obviously it would have had a strong effect on Cody, and especially Drew McIntyre as well, and a little bit on Damian Priest too. And of course, present day, the effect on the Vision, and without AJ Lee there, we wouldn't get a big return moment there either. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you think it would play out if Punk would have still found a way to get released from AEW, even if that incident with Jack Perry hadn't happened, and he would have maybe returned to the WWE at the Royal Rumble or at WrestleMania as a surprise, like Cody Rhodes did in 2022. Or if you think that somehow maybe Punk would have been able to stick it out there to still put MJF over one more time and have their feud really conclude in that third match. So leave your comments down below. I appreciate everyone's feedback and all their topic suggestions. I'll definitely be getting to them, especially as long as I can stop getting sick all the freaking time. And I'm going to be back soon to make up for this lack of episode last week with another one soon, with another topic of what could have been in wrestling. So thank you everyone again for your patience. Apologies for my inconsistent scheduling, but that's going to get back on track soon. And I'll be back, and I look forward to hearing and seeing what everyone has to say. Thanks a lot, everyone.